We're live.
Good evening, everyone in United States, and good morning, folks, for joining from India. We are here once again for our weekly seminar as part of Professor Nanda Fellowship Training Program in Human Rights, as part of International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. For those who are joining for the first time, this is our logo. And at this time, on behalf of the Board of Directors and the executive team of the ICHRRF, I invite our audience to yet another seminar in the ICHRRF Professor Ved P. Nanda Fellowship Training Program. We have a very distinguished faculty chaired by Professor Ved Nanda, Professor Yashwant Pathak, Professor Nalini Rao, Professor Lavanya Vemsani, myself, our Executive Director, Mr. Carl Clemens, our Legal Director, Mr. Hardam Tripathi, Dr. Yashodhan Agolgaonkar, Professor Nidhi Shandurnikar, and Dr. Richard Benkins. As of now, we have two fellows in the fellowship training program, Mr. Pachori, who joined in January of 2022, and Anushree Ghisad, who joined in July 2022. Our seminars have a very standard format. First 25 minutes, there's a presentation by the fellow. This is followed by 10 minutes commentary by our chief mentor, Professor Ved Nanda. Then there's a 25 minutes discussion by the faculty preceptor, and for each seminar, there's a separate faculty preceptor. And last 30 minutes we use for questions and answers. The topic for today's seminar is very, very important. Religious conversions by fraud or deception and human rights violation. So that is what we are going to discuss today. And the faculty preceptor today is Professor Yashwant Pathak. And as I said, the fellow presenting today would be Anushree Ghisad. Before we start, there are a couple of announcements. The report release event for special hearing on Kashmiri Hindu genocide is scheduled for Sunday, August 28, 10 a.m. Eastern Daytime, that is New York time, and 7:30 p.m. India time. The announcement would be sent, an Eventbrite announcement and registration link will be provided fairly soon in next 2-3 days. We are also inviting applications for January 2023 session of the fellowship training program. And we are inviting volunteer faculty members to mentor our fellows in this training program. Some housekeeping rules. Kindly keep yourself unmuted. Change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt the fellow or the faculty when they are speaking. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to pose questions. We encourage you to send your questions by chat function. Questions have to be very precise and specific. Please don't send lengthy comments and lengthy monologue in the form of a question. Finally, like all our fellowship training programs, this seminar is being recorded. It would be available on our website as well as on our YouTube channel within next 24 hours. So without further ado, I would invite our fellow Anushree Ghisad to make her presentation on religious conversions by fraud or deception and violation of human rights. Anushree Ghisad, the floor is yours.
Anushree, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Please unmute yourself, Anushree.
Dhanyawad Adityanji. Namaskar to everyone. I think this format is slightly different. So I have found the share button. Let me share my screen. I don't understand how do I share my presentation.
Okay, at the bottom there will be a tab stating share.
Yes, I'm following the usual procedure, but somehow I am unable to locate my own PPT, which is already minimized. And usually it appears right there. All I need to do is to just click on it.
Yeah, you might have to share full screen, Anushree, and then you can open, maximize your PowerPoint.
This is full screen. Oh.
There you go.
Yes, it is coming now.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, we can see it.
Right. Okay. So, namaskar everyone. Topic for my today's presentation is forced convergence and conversion by deceit as human right violation. For this presentation, I have largely premised this presentation based on my understanding of the subject topic, and the examples that I have taken into account are largely confined to the Indian subcontinent. Also, for this particular presentation, I have tried to present it through my perspective, as I have seen and understood forced conversion and conversion by deceit in my lifetime through some live examples. So my thought process is going to be quite central for this presentation rather than making it more generic. So with that, I would like to give you a presentation layout. This is how I wish to proceed. So first, I would be discussing need to recognize forced or deceitful conversion as a genuine human right problem. Then I would like to share views of some prominent personalities on religious conversion. Then we would just go through means of fraudulent religion conversions. Then what exactly is forced conversion, and we would try to see one case study. Different types of conversion by deceit. Then there is something that I have come up with, which is induced conversion. And is there any way forward? And before that, I would also like to discuss why conversion by deceit in particular finds traction within Indian subcontinent per se. I hope I would be able to cover this in the next 25 minutes. So before I begin my actual presentation, this is one particular quotation that I would like to share by Swami Vivekananda. It says, "Do not criticize others, for all doctrines and all dogmas are good. But show them by your lives that religion is no matter of books and beliefs, but of spiritual realization." So when I say the presentation is going to be through my perspective, what I meant is that my understanding of life and my understanding of civilization, it comes from this philosophy where the ultimate goal of life, the highest pursuit of life is essentially spiritual realization. And all pantha, all sampradaya, all ways of practice, they are mere means to reach up to that ultimate goal. And it is possibly the most compassionate, all-inclusive, tolerant and most empathetic way to look at life, which embraces all possibility to realize the innate divinity which exists in all of us. Having said that, I would like to discuss why is the need to recognize forced or deceitful conversion as human rights violation and something even beyond. So the thought process with which I have been brought up to, that essentially underscores that the entire humankind, and when I say humankind, it it's not just about the humankind, but all Jiva and Ajiva elements, they are deeply interwoven and their existence is interdependent. So it speaks of Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu philosophy, and these lokas include all sentinel beings, and there is no differentiation whatsoever based on caste, creed, ethnicity, sex, country, least of all religion. And it is this thought process that has in a way shaped my attitude, my perception, or my outlook towards the world. I would like to believe that I am brought up as a modern individual in a liberal space where individual liberty is respected. Therefore, individual rights, individual liberties, including the right to practice and profess one's faith, it's something which is very intrinsic to my life, and I never thought that this is something which could be an issue of human rights violation. But essence of human life or essence of Indic way of human life is inclusivity. There is no concept of blasphemy here. You can be an idol worshipper if you want. If you don't want it that way, you can be Nirgun Nirakar Upasak. You can be Astik, you can be Nastik. So in that case, if person is willingly choosing to convert from one religion to another, it should not be a problem to me per se. But still, why conversion should be a matter of concern to me, because in this case we are discussing forced conversion or conversion by deceitful means, and that is personally a problem to me on 4 counts. Number 1, it is a potential problem for law and order. So more than faith, if religion is being used to showcase muscle power, then it has potential to create law and order issue, because there is violent assertion in the name of religion. Recently we have seen that the residents in Western Bengal, they have to actually ask for police protection just so that they can carry out with their age-old religious practices of Durga Puja. So that essentially creates law and order problem. On second count, if in the name of religion,
Anushree, are you actually sharing the relevant slide? Because we're not seeing it. We're only seeing the title slide right now. Yeah, I think maybe you put it on play. Instead of putting on play, just tab through what we're seeing on the screen. Just tab through your slides.
Can you see now any change?
No.
Can you see any change now?
No, we're only seeing your title slide.
You need to move your slides.
I'm moving my slides, Adityanji, but
Yeah,
I
think you instead of actually playing your presentation, just just hit the escape key, get out of that. Escape. And then this, exactly. Yeah, now we can see your third slide. Maybe just pull that down so it becomes larger. The note space, make that smaller. Yeah, just make that smaller. No. No, just you can you see the notes where you have your notes. You can put, yeah, exactly. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, can you see my screen now as it is?
Yes, perfect.
This contains a quotation from Swami Vivekananda. I explained that. So now I'm on this page as to why we need to recognize forced or deceitful conversion as human rights violation. So first, why it actually matters to me, because it has potential to create law and order problem, and we have seen live examples. Secondly, if it creates national security issue, then obviously it is a matter of concern. We have seen events wherein fatwa has been issued against celebration of traditional festivals like Holi, Rakhi Purnima, in which case there is a direct sense that primacy of religion takes prominence over over the country or over the nation, and that in a way is direct challenge to the unity and integrity of my nation. If religious exclusivity is sowing seeds of intolerance in a country which is as diverse as India, or in Indian subcontinent which is equally diverse, then effectively that can pave way for external forces to intrude into the domestic matters of India, and that I consider as a challenge to national security. So to cite an example, India's civil nuclear policy, this is way back in this is way back in 2008, 2009, India's civil nuclear policy was vehemently opposed by three specific NGOs which were associated with Vatican, and it was Dr. Manmohan Singh's government which categorically said that this civil nuclear policy and the entire Kudankulam civil nuclear plant and its establishment was opposed by these three particular NGOs which received money for religious purposes, but somehow they diverted that money and used it for protest. Now, why would these religiously motivated NGOs not want India to grow stronger and be self-sufficient? Is that not interference in the issue of national importance? So that becomes a national security issue. Thirdly, and most importantly, I see it as a direct threat to my conscience because I come from a non-proselytizing thought process. Now, Swami Dayananda Saraswati has broadly divided the world religions into two categories as aggressive and non-aggressive. So, according to him, Zoroastrians follow their religious tradition without attempting to convert anybody. This is true with the followers of Jewish tradition, Vedic tradition also, Shintoism, Taoism, and many other traditional religions of the world. Now, there are some religions, specifically Islam and Christianity, in which commitment to proselytization is considered to be sacred. Who implements that and who doesn't implement that, that remains a completely different question. So, if proselytization is ordained by religious tenets, then for a person like me who doesn't believe in proselytization, that effectively means my space is shrunken. And that is a direct threat to my conscience, my spiritual existence, and even physical existence, because this in a way promotes the path of exclusivity, which is again in negation with the path of inclusivity. And the last point being, the values which are peddled through forced conversion and deceitful convergence, they are basically inconsistent with plurality and democracy. Why I'm saying so? Because the Rigvedic mantra of Ekam Sadvipra Bahuda Vidanti, that forms the basis of pluralism in all aspects of human life, as far as Indic life goes. Now, here Ekam doesn't mean one. Here Ekam means absolute. And since truth is absolute, it can be experienced and it can be expressed in different ways. So anything absolute cannot be limited to only one form. It must have many different forms of manifestation. So pluralism is the essence of absoluteness. So naturally, Indic traditions believe in not one model of life, but in many forms of belief and practices. So if there is a belief that only particular way of life needs to take precedence, then in that case, the plurality and the democratic traditions are essentially challenged. So all this constitutes grotesque human rights violation at various levels, because it is directly a violation to right to peaceful life, right to culture, right to indigenous traditions, right to conscience. Everything is violated, and all these are actually enshrined in a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Coming to what some prominent personalities have to say about religious conversion, I will quickly cover two major personalities. Founding father of modern India, Mahatma Gandhi ji. Now, Mahatma Gandhi ji vehemently opposed religious conversion, and he was against even the concept of negation of religion. Gandhi ji was a hardcore religious man. He declared that he could not live with religion without he could not live without religion even for a moment. Now, interestingly enough, Gandhiji considered religious conversion as a sin against God and even crime against humanity. I already discussed that Indic traditions do not believe in one mode of life, but in many forms of God and in many forms of practices. So Gandhiji could easily accept any form of religious practice as manifestation of absolute power of God. So he considered every religion to be true and as part of spiritual realization. So for him, it becomes absolutely meaningless to force one person to convert from one religion to another, because truth cannot differ. He was very clear that Hinduism provides space for all religious faiths. So religious exclusivity, in his opinion, it gives people right not just to believe, but to claim that their religion, guided by a particular book or a particular prophet, is the only way of reaching to the God. Now, according to Gandhiji, what it effectively means is that those who do not subscribe to this theory, they practice bad religion. It means you're pitting a religion against another religion, and that in a way negates the concept of spirituality, because as per Gandhiji, spirituality must guide every action of a religious man. Now, everyone who believes in religion claims that his religion is good religion and others' religion is bad religion, then that is going to create a very fertile situation for conflict, chaos, and disaster. Moving on, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, when I'm saying Swami Dayananda Saraswati, he's founder of Arsha Vidya Center. He has given many speeches on public forums where he has categorically mentioned how religious conversion breeds violence. So he has discussed what constitutes aggression. Is aggression only limited to some physical form of violence, or eroding cultural heritage and civilizational legacy is also a form of violence? So he discusses those sides, and in that context, he says that aggressive religion and non-aggressive religions, they are not on the same plank. Conversion is therefore a rank one-sided aggression. The genuineness of non-aggressive tradition cannot be changed, and therefore they cannot be asked to do the same thing as that of aggressive religion. He once wrote an open letter to Pope John Paul II, which was way back in 1999, and that is very categorically says that you cannot ask me to respond to the conversion by converting others to my religion just because it is not part of my tradition and I innately don't believe in it. We don't believe in conversion, even though certain Hindu organizations have taken back to convert some people. Conversion is not merely violence against people, it is violence against people who are essentially committed to non-violence. And he also says that this is a very deep intrusion, as religious person is the deepest and the most basic in any individual. So when that person is disturbed and that person is hurt, that hurt is sustained in a very deep level, and that hurt can further get catapulted at a larger level. So conversion, in his opinion, is a profound act of violence. It is wrong to strike someone who is unarmed. Conversion is not merely violence against people, it is violence against people who are committed to non-violence, as he says. Coming to the means of fraudulent religious conversions, it is not just limited to fraud or deceit or forceful conversion or intimidation. It also goes into the domain of threat, deceit, conversions through gift, monetary benefits, misguided material lure. Because forced conversion was a topic which was there in the topic that was given to me. Here I would just like to take one case study. This report is actually published on Radio Liberty in 2021. You can actually find it on YouTube, which talks of Pakistan's conversion factory for Hindu brides. It speaks of teenage girls residing in the Sindh province of Pakistan, majority of whom come from absolutely not so well-to-do families, and they are under tremendous financial pressure. And given their condition, how in one way or the other these girls are forced to convert, and human rights organizations in Pakistan have found that over 1,000 Hindu girls are forced to convert in year 2020. Now, as a matter of fact, very few cases gets reported, and even when these cases are reported, proving coercion for conversion is very difficult, especially in a theocratic state. And it is in this context that Swami Dayananda Saraswati calls this as a profound type of violence. Coming to the part of conversion by deceit, I have constituted 4 parts into it. One of the aspects is giving false hope of equality. Now, what I have come across in my lifetime as to what is happening in many parts of India, the people coming from proselytizing thought process usually use this as an argument that many sections within the Hindu society are discriminated against and they are not treated with dignity. So if they convert to other religion which believe in proselytizing order, they would be treated as equal because equality is at the foundation of such religions. Now, if that is the case, and if casteism is being cited as the reason for conversion, then are we trying to imply that there are no sects or there are no hierarchies within Islamic fold or Christian fold? Is Christian society free of caste and sectarian barriers? As per the open reports, I don't know its validity, but as per open reports, even American TV actress Meghan Markle, she had to change her religion in order to marry into British royal family. In India, Pasmanda Muslims, who are basically the local converts and who hail from Indian subcontinents, they are a living examples who are openly challenging the elitist of elite 5% Ashrafites on many public forums. So giving false hope of equality is, in my opinion, conversion by deceit. Another point of conversion of deceit is how it operates in academic institutions. And one striking example for that is what happened with this bright student called Lavanya from Tamil Nadu. Now, we all know that she secured first rank in her school in SLLC. She was studying, apparently, she was studying in a Christian school. And she was repeatedly asked to convert to Christianity. Now, she and her family kept refusing. Later, she was inexplicably overloaded with work starting from locking hostel gates to maintaining accounts to bearing scoldings from the nuns. She was even forced back to stay in the hostel during during Christmas holidays, and there was incredible pressure on her to convert. So this kind of intrusion into the space of conscience is not just violation of that space, but it is violation of basic human dignity. Now, academic institutions are supposed to provide a free space so that human personality can come out, and there is implicitly free and fair atmosphere over there. Since that was not the case, Lavanya was in a way forced to commit suicide. But again, was that really a suicide, or was that killing of a minor who had a very rational, independent mind and who believed that her conscience would be protected within the Constitution of India? The third part, in my opinion, is that of what I have seen personally, implementation of Joshua project. Now, Joshua project is in implementation in various parts of Indian subcontinent, including Afghanistan. Since I come from Vidarbha, I would like to take this example. In certain remote parts of Vidarbha, where Madhya Gond tribal community is in quite high proportion, certain techniques are used by the fact finders of Joshua project who like to do some kind of demographic study of the region. So in their pursuit to identify unique features of the community, they go on to underscore as to how that uniqueness of this Madhya Gond community is in contrast with Hinduism. And then they try to allure them to Christian fold. So in this particular case, some people from Madhya Gond community are constantly told that the gods that you worship, the idols that you worship are totally different from Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. And the way you sing Aarti, the traditional instruments that you use are very different from what we see in traditional Hindu temples where Aarti is performed, which is why you are not essentially a Hindu, and possibly it is high time for you to convert, to think about coming to this Christian fold. So is this in keeping with the inclusive nature of Indic thought that celebrates diversity? That is a question to be asked here. The last example or the last point is inculturation. Now, let me give you two glaring examples of inculturation techniques. So just try to see this, the Nama Japa, how it goes, and it is right there in front of you. Yeshom, Yeshom, Ishvara, Ishvara, how the celebrant goes, and you can read it for yourself. Now, these are excerpts from a complete prayer which was conducted during the order of the Mass for the monastic meeting in Petersham, Massachusetts, way back in October 1977. Now, the occasion was basically convened to lay foundation for the formation of monastic interreligious dialogue in North America. It was sponsored by Americans. So this example itself goes on to showcase what inculturation is all about. It is basically gradual acquisition of characteristics and norm of the culture, wherein you in a way wish to leave along, you wish to make some kind of inroads. Basically, it is Hinduization of Christianity without compromising on exclusivity of core Christian tenets. You can see these two examples of it. I would really request all our viewers to go through a very well-researched paper by B.R. Haranji. It goes on by this title, which I have actually shared in references. That research paper talks about how Christian priests are projected as Brahman priests. They are also using Aryan Dravidian fault line to consolidate their base. How translation of Bibles into local languages are in a way very subtly underscoring into anti-Brahmanical rhetorics. How traditional Indian dance forms like Bharatanatyam are being decoupled from its Vedic heritage. The second image that you see here is that of a Marathi book called Christa Puran. It was written by Father Stephen around 500 years ago. Now, Father Stephen studied how Marathi Santa or poet saints, they spread their message through literature and through poetry. Since Bhakti movement was had received quite traction in Maharashtra, Santa Jnaneshwar Tukaram or even Santa Eknath, they composed ovis in praise of local gods, like Lord Vitthal of Pandharpur. So in Christa Puran, what you basically see is ovis which are written by Father in a way that goes on to showcase that Yeshu Christ himself is none other than a saint. Now, one scholar, S.G. Turpule, what he had said about this is that the structure of Christa Puran, the name itself goes on to showcase that Christianity is in a way packaged and repackaged so that it becomes more appealing to the local Marathi population. So the structure of this Puran is such that the inner statue is that of Jesus Christ and the decorum of the entire mandir is that of Hindu style. Now, the
Actually,
way
you have exceeded your time limit, kindly conclude.
Okay, can I just get 2 more minutes so that I can come to 2 points? So basically drawing similarities between Christianity and Hinduism, there are many such tricks which are replacing Hindu deities with Yeshu Krista and making Hindus to believe it. For example, reading verses from Bible in some part of Kerala is now known as Veda Pathan. There is a concept of pilgrimage site, Tirtha Kshetra, which has been displayed in some churches of Kerala and Tamil Nadu also. I will skip some other examples. So Swami Vivekananda, who actually narrated the story of Yeshu Krista in a very emotional manner, and he introduced celebration of Christmas in Ramakrishna Mats all over, he basically decried the proselytizing Christians in these words that you are not Christians, you need to go back to Christ. He himself was strongly opposed to the idea of conversion. So one may argue that what is the problem here? This is perfectly in tune with the constitutional rights given within the Indian Constitution. Problem here is with the intent, because the entire edifice lies on exclusivity. Now, this exclusivity automatically negates a millennia-old civilizational legacy because the world has, in a way, seen light only in 2000 years. Anything before that is deemed pagan, uncivilized, uncouth, and even subhuman. If this is the lens of approach, then that is not in keeping with the plural, tolerant, and all-encompassing character of ancient legacy of this land. And that is tantamount to snatching right to culture, right to indigenous tradition, right to spiritual legacy. And hence it is violation of human rights at physical, emotional, psychological, and even spiritual level. I was about to speak about induced conversion. It speaks about 1813 Charter Act, wherein British Parliament actually gave right to missionaries to come and spread religion in India so that Hindus can come out of darkness. Then I was also going to speak about jizya tax as to how the implementation of jizya tax in a way fostered an ecosystem wherein those who wanted to follow their traditional practices were de-incentivized and it was becoming economically less viable for them. Finally, coming to the slide as to why conversion by deceit finds traction in India, I would just skip it and come to the last slide. Is there any way forward here? So, willful conversion might not be a problem as per the Constitution of India as long as it doesn't affect the social cultural fabric of this country. Now, cultural references, when they are changed, then that in a way ends up affecting the cultural fabric. It in a way ends up changing the aspiration and attitude of people. So the entire edifice of Ekam Sadvipra Bauddha Vipanti, Bauddha Vadanti, that merely remains a platitude. And such developments also compromise the spiritual core of the country, which is the basic edifice of the country. So this is a photo that I have taken from the Hindu article. All these 4 women from Kerala who actually went to join Islamic State in Afghanistan, only one of them is actually Muslim by birth. Other 3 are recent converts. And their parents go on to showcase in their interviews as to how they were converted via deceitful means. Point here being not acknowledging existence of conversion by force and deceit, it in a way empowers and enables the perpetrators which are involved in it. And it is a direct attack on cultural heritage, civilizational legacy, and in a way the basic identity which defines those who believe in India as a civilizational state. Hence, acknowledgement without fear of any political incorrectness is crucial. And that, in my opinion, would be a way forward. I think in the interest of time, this is where I would like to stop. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. So as usual, after fellows present, can you stop sharing your screen, please?
I am trying to do that.
Okay. So I'll invite Professor Nanda to give his comments.
Dhanyavad Adityanji. Anushree ji, very thorough, very comprehensive, and wonderful presentation. Adityanji, it's 7:41, and I have to leave at 8, and I would rather listen to Professor Pathak ji. So I'll just make 2 points that I intended to say. One is looking at what freedom, religious freedom means under human rights, and going back to declarations, resolutions, treaties on it. And then to say that freedom of religion, when people who convert say that it's a freedom of religion to convert. And I think here, 2 things. One is that there has to be consent, but not just consent, but informed consent. And the second part about all that is that at this stage, we need to realize, recognize, and we do, that for Christians, it is their not simply tradition, but it's their religious, it's their spiritual demand, they say, that they want to see that all these non-believers who cannot go to heaven, that they have got to save their soul. And so I was going to just mention a few things about it, but I think I would rather listen to Pathak ji. So thank you very much. I would rather have Pathak ji say, so my comments were going to be just based upon these.
Professor Pathak, you are the faculty preceptor today, so the floor is yours. Kindly unmute yourself.
Well, thank you very much, Anushree, for very good presentation and quite detailed information. And as Anushree had covered most of the examples from India, as she is based in India, I thought I might provide some insight into how the things are happening around the world, especially, it is becoming more and more challenging to the people around the world. And I'm going to start with Lithuania. Lithuania used to be a Romua country. They used to call it Romua. Their tradition was Romua. And then um, for 400 years, Lithuania is considered to be the last country being converted to Christianity. So they resisted the Christian aggression. And unfortunately, it so happened that after 400 years, the majority population was succumbed by many different ways. And now the Romuan population, which is a very minuscule minority there, is suffering from all sorts of deceit and fraud and everything, so that it is hard for them to practice their own religion. And same thing happens in, at least I have been closely associated with the organization called European Congress of Ethnic Religions. So I had attended several of their conferences, and I was in Italy. And for the conference in Italy, when the Italian pagan people wanted to perform their ceremonies, they chose to perform the ceremonies after 11 o'clock in the night. And interestingly, if you would have seen those ceremonies, you would have thought that, oh my God, these are all people, are they human beings or they are ghosts? Because every Italian person who are practicing the pagan tradition was wearing huge robes covering their faces, so it will be very difficult to identify who he is. And that is how they wanted to protect themselves, because there have been several incidences where the pagan people in Italy were attacked and they were not allowed to perform their ceremonies. Same thing happens with the Asatrus and all different traditions which are in Belgium, in UK, in Finland. So this is becoming a challenging task for those who believe in their own traditions. Now, as a human being, I think if I am born Hindu, I have every right to die as Hindu. And if that is my human right, then it should not be violated by using all bad things which they have been doing. And it is very interesting to see how things work. In Malaysia, if you go, unless you get converted to Islam, you are not getting government jobs. Now that is becoming such a challenging scenario for the population there, and there are population there. There is a very diverse cultural, diverse population in Malaysia, but because of these systems in place, they are forced to get converted to Islam, and then they are getting the job. If they don't get it, then they get persecuted, and they have different types of ways to convert people, um, and fraudulent ways actually. If you go to South Africa, it is almost similar scenario is happening, and it's a phenomenon which you can see a global phenomenon, because every conversion attempts all over the world in all different countries begin in the poor communities. It is whether it is a India or Southeast Asia or Europe or Africa, majority of the targets are poor communities in that country, and by different ways they attract these people, take the exploit their poverty and convert them to Christianity or Islam based on their tradition, because these are the two religions really creating challenges for all the other religions in the world and indigenous traditions also. If you go to South America, same thing you can see in Guatemala. There used to be Mayan culture, huge temples and everything, but they all lost. And now it is so difficult for the Mayan people to practice their own religion, because if they practice in public, they are persecuted, they are beaten up, and there is a lot of activity against them, so that they cannot even uh, protect themselves or perform their ceremonies or perform their rituals in public. And this is a challenge in many of the South American countries. Same thing you see it in Brazil too. So globally, it is observed that these two religions are attacking mostly the poor people of the, or poorest strata of the society. And then they use different types of techniques. Like in South Africa, if I have personally witnessed that, because one of the family, when they were going through the hardship, the church started providing them food. And after every week, there will be Sunday, people will deliver the food, and it was a great thing. And probably fourth or fifth Sunday, there was a Bible at the bottom, and sixth Sunday, they started coming to the church, because either you come to church, then only you get the food, or goodbye. And this is where these type of things happen uh, around the world. In case of, I really want to share with you a very interesting thing, because in Arunachal Pradesh is one of the state in Bharat, which is in the northeast India. And as Anushree has covered a lot of things, but in that area, this Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Nagaland, all these, they were mostly the traditional cultures in those areas. Now, Arunachal Pradesh was the first state to pass the Freedom of Religion Bill, where they said that no tribal person will be converted to Christianity. And it was passed by the state government, and that was the first state to pass the government. But now what the churches have done, that they established schools on the border of Arunachal Pradesh, and they started picking up children from different villages of Arunachal Pradesh, brought them to their schools, converted them to Christianity in the name of education. They provided some breakfast and lunch and all those things, and in due course of time, by the time they are 7, 8, 9 years old, they were converted to Christianity. And then now they became so strong that almost 30% of the Arunachal Pradesh is now converted, and the government withdrew the freedom of religion bill. There is interesting thing which I had seen. Mizoram is a very another state in India. Almost 90% of the people are converted. Now, how fraudulent the conversion practices were, and the same thing they have adopted in Australia also with the Australian Aboriginals. It is very interesting to understand that in these traditions, there was a concept of purity of relationship. And the purity of relationship was in such a way that, like in Australian Aboriginal people, there are 14 different clans. And each clan, each child which is born is assigned to a particular clan based on certain traditional ceremonies, the traditional rituals, and they get the dream and all those things. But they normally, once it is done, then there is no intermarriages within the clan. So if you belong to the Baramundi, it's the name of a fish there. So Baramundi, it will sound like a Indian name, but they call it Baramundi. And then once you are assigned to that clan, then you don't marry with the same thing happens in Mizoram also. And in Mizoram also, the people are assigned to a particular clan, and once they are clan, the parents will allow their young teenage girl to go with this boy from the same clan, because there is a purity of relationship. There will not be any challenge. Now, what happens is, as soon as, sometimes it used to happen that a young boy did not know that the girl is from the same clan, and it so happened that they came to know, and then they suddenly were separated. The society said, no, that is not allowed. And the Christian missionary will go there and tell the boys, ha, it is allowed. You can stay in church, become Christian, and Christianity allows you everything. And this is where the purity of relationship was spoiled in many of the indigenous traditions around the world. And this type of freedom was provided, and they tried to break the cultural strength of all the people around the world. There is a cultural strength. There is a strength which keeps the people together. In India, we call it dharma, but in other indigenous traditions, it is called way of life. It's their way of life that they follow the way of life and keep their traditions and their culture strong. Simple example is like in Maoris in New Zealand. If somebody dies, every person from the village has to visit that house. If he doesn't or she doesn't, then obviously that person or family is outcasted. Now, this is the cultural tradition. And this has been practiced by Maoris for many years. But as the conversions happened, things started changing and they were excluded. And this is where they started breaking the thing. In India, if I strongly recommend you all to look at a very beautiful book called Catholic Ashrams. And in Kerala, there are hundreds of them. If you go there, you'll feel like you are in temple. If you look at the Christian priests, they are all wearing the saffron color robes, and they pray Mother Mary as Nirmala Mata. This is how it is happening in fraudulent ways of putting up Christianity in the form of something which is not Christianity. To be honest, it is not a Christianity thing. But this is how this is happening. So I think there is a violation because every person who is born in a particular tradition has every right to stay in the tradition and die in that tradition. And once you stop doing that, then obviously you are violating his human rights. And I always use these two terms, and I have been using it that, the traditions which were ancient traditions in the world, they always thought about human being in totality and total humanity. And I will explain you that in African tradition, there are several sacraments. The child, male or female, undergoes several sacraments in the traditional African lifestyle, and then only they achieve the adulthood, and then there is a death ceremony. So, as a Maasai or as a Kikuyu or as a Xhosa or Asante, you have to undergo all these ceremonies and undergo the death ceremony and finally complete your cycle of life. And this is where they believe that there is no cycle of life because there will be a day of judgment, and then only you will go to heaven. And that's why people spend thousands of dollars to get themselves buried on the Mount of Olives, because there is a story. I don't want to spend more time on it. But I think there is a good sign today. I have seen that there is a penitence from the Pope. Probably it is now high time for ICHRRF also to make a resolution to tell the Pope Francis and especially all these Muslim leaders to ask for pardon from all the indigenous traditions as well as from the Hindus in India, because they have destroyed a lot of good things around the world. And now the world is again looking back, and probably another 10-15 years, world will learn a lot from this indigenous tradition. Probably that will resolve many of the modern challenges which are faced by all of us. And I think we as a ICHRRF group should think about really saying that conversion is a violence. It is a violence against the humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pathak. So we have done first hour of the seminar. Last 30 minutes are for question and answers and discussion. And just to give a different perspective, we are a small group, so I will invite people. And maybe I would like to invite Christina to give her perspective, because we have heard the Indic perspective. And we want to, and Professor Pathak talked about global perspective in various countries. So Christina can speak from her lived experiences in US society, is this an issue or it is, just a little bit of hype?
I am concerned about the forced coercion in marriages and based off of sometimes need from the families. And it doesn't sound like there's an easy exit strategy for these women who realize that they didn't sign up for this long-term relationship or this long-term religious conversion. And so I was wondering, what is that process like, and how difficult is it really for them to be able to call their families or back home and say, this is not working out for me. It's not safe. I'm not happy with this. How do I get back home?
I think she's having some technical difficulty.
Yeah, my battery saver came on. So that's my question is, it doesn't sound like there's clear or strong policy in place, and then there's a lot of pushback from societies and governments saying, well, we don't want you, we don't know what kind of security threat that you pose, and are you looking to spy on what we're doing? So I guess those are my questions is how easy is it for a wife to have an exit plan if she decides that she doesn't want to live that life, and what kind of formal policies are in place to help that family?
I think we will address some of those issues towards the end of the presentation or the discussion. I'm going to invite our Executive Director, Carl Clemens, to give his comments and observations. Carl.
Thank you, Dr. Arvindji. Thank you, Anushree, for your comments, as well as Dr. Pathak. I just wanted to, I completely agree that, there is a ton of fraud and violence, grassroots level violence being used in various parts of the world. It's been used historically, and it continues to be used in different parts of the world for conversion. And, one cannot continuously advertise oneself as a religion of love or a religion of peace while continuing atrocity into the present time for centuries now. But and really it comes down to, but I think the root of the discussion comes down to even what really is religion. For instance, in the Vatican City or in Italy, the last time I checked, Hinduism is not recognized as a religion. So like a Hindu organization based in Italy cannot get the benefits of a regular as a minority religious institution. So because they doesn't fulfill their definition of a religion. Similarly, if one looks at Indic, Hindu, or Buddhist dharmic texts, Christianity and Islam would not meet the definition of dharma. Right. So there's a fundamental difference in what's happening there, and I think that needs to be addressed. I would like to just humbly disagree with some of the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi or Arshavidya Gurukulams, Dayanand Saraswati ji. All religions do have a social agenda, and all of them have or attempt to influence political thought and political equations. And Indian religions did too. Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, they all did. So I'm not sure how they base their idea on the fact that it's a non-proselytizing or a non-interfering, very individual kind of religion. I would just humbly disagree with that part. But the conflict is a fundamental part of the world. In fact, many philosophers have said that conflict itself is justice, and without conflict, there is no living philosophy. But the method of conflict, the method of bringing ideas or even social groups into conflict should be towards harmonization at a higher level, rather than genocide and obliterating cultures or even people, because ultimately everything runs into its opposite. So in this case, just taking this thought, we can go back to, for instance, the ancient Greek religion, and there's Heraclitus on one side, there's Parmenides, his opposite, on the other side. They had opposing views, they had opposing groups behind them, and there was a conflict between them, in terms of ideas, and sometimes even socially to some extent. But it was orchestrated under the government in a way that people can improve their understanding. And then Hellenic civilization was militarily overwhelmed by the Romans, and the Roman religions, they took the Greek ideas with due acknowledgement. They celebrated Heraclitus, Parmenides, the pre-Socratic as well as the post-Socratic Greek religious figures. And these, today we call them philosophers, but they were absolutely, in every sense of the term, religious prophets or leaders in that pagan culture. And so the Roman religion, which militarily overwhelmed the Greeks, they borrowed several of their ideas with due acknowledgement, celebrating these Greek contributors, instead of trying to culturally annihilate them or misappropriate their ideas without giving due acknowledgement. So that's a good model of how religions can conflict with one another, but in an honest kind of way. So I think the point that I see is the undue violence and fraud that happens. So I think the best method is to have, for instance, in the Indic context, the concept of Shastrarth, which is where you have a debate according to the highest standards of logical argumentation and philosophical argumentation. You have a debate between people under the aegis of government and civil institutions. If there is some major disagreement that is causing social conflict beyond the bounds of law and order, and then and then whatever truth comes out of that churning is adopted by the government as policy, and it is implemented at a national level using the means of law and order. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening. Large parts have been left as ungoverned, and religious institutions take the place of things that government should be doing, and that's where the whole problem is. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. I think Professor Pathak wants to raise a question. He raised his hand. So
I just want to, share some interesting thing, because Carl has raised, and even Christina was saying that how we can resolve some of the challenges. There are certain solutions which people are finding it out. For example, in Africa, in many African countries now, they are indigenizing Christianity. So you will find that there are churches which are indigenous churches. So on one side they practice, go to the church and read Bible and all those things. When that is done, they come out of the church and then do their practices. And that is picking up very fast in many countries in Africa. And you must have seen that the Zambian president took the oath in traditional Zambian language. And then, there is a revival which is going on there. So that is indigenization of Christianity, and then adopting Christianity to the cultural ethos of the traditions or culture. That is one thing which is people are adopting. If you look at in United States, we used to have Native American. There were 500 nations. Now you all know the history of America, so I don't want to say that. But what they did was 7 of these Native American nations came together, and now they formed a new nation called Haudenosaunee. You might have heard about it, but there is a Onida, Onondaga, all these nations, Iroquois. So they all formed a new group called Haudenosaunee, which literally means a people of the big house or people of the long house. That means it is accommodating the world. The concept is way of life. The concept is for total humanity. But now, if they want to do anything, none of the American government or any of this government will definitely support them for sure. So they come up with their own solution. In India, in Arunachal Pradesh, what they did was, there was an inferiority complex which was created within the minds of the people, tribal people, saying that, look, we go to church on Sunday, where the hell you go? And that was creating a big inferiority complex in the minds of the people. So the local traditional leaders started putting up, I mean, they never had a concept of having temples. They never had, because they, as Anushree was saying, Nirgun Nirakar Parmeshwar prayers are there. Like if you go to Bali, even today, they call the god as Achintya. And there are no idols and all those things, huge temples, but no idols, because it was a Advaita concept. Same thing is there in Arunachal Pradesh. So what they did was they started Doni Polo. Doni Polo is the sun god. And then now they established in every village where there is a church, there is a Doni Polo sun temple. And automatically now those who are practicing the Doni Polo sun temple ritual, now they have a place to go there. And now that inferiority complex has been removed from the minds of the younger generation. And this is where the indigenous traditions are addressing some of these challenges which are faced by the conversion, and which are, I think, I have tried to answer partially your question raised.
Okay. There is a question from the audience by Ishan. The question is how we see the state-sponsored support for religious conversions, how we look at burden of following secularism by one group while other religious groups enjoy the comfort of having official religious status or something like that. I think this is a very complex question, and it depends upon the socio-political arrangement or system or constitutional arrangement in a particular country. So we cannot give a universal answer. Professor Pathak did talk about problems in Malaysia. So that is a very good example of state-sponsored support for religious conversion, because you have a policy that supports the so-called Bhumiputra community, which is princes of the soil. So the Malay community is the princes of the soil, and in every business there has to be a Malay partner. For every government job, there are reservations for Malays. It is like a kind of constitutionally sanctioned apartheid. A non-Muslim, if he or she marries a Malay person or prince of the soil, has to convert to Islam. So for every reason, there is a support for conversion to get government scholarships in colleges and all. You get preference if you happen to belong to that particular faith. And Malaysia is not the only example of this. Pretty much all the Islamic countries follow the same thing. So issue is that what happens in democratic systems? Again, supposedly in democratic systems, you have separation of church and the state, or the temple and the state. But does that really happen? I mean, you look at the congresspersons in United States, and all they harp about is Judeo-Christian traditions, how they have to protect the Christian traditions in United States. Supposedly, we are living in a secular country where there's no state religion in United States, but the system is de facto a Judeo-Christian system, and you create institutions of the state that are fostering a particular religion or a particular belief. So it becomes a complex kind of thing, and I will leave it at that. I want to foster more discussion, so I'm going to invite Professor Nalini Rao. She has been away for a while and she's joined after a long time. So Professor Rao, if you want to give any comments. Kindly unmute yourself. You are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, so I really appreciate the talk that we had today by Anushree and Yashwant Pathak and the insights and what is going on in the world. The only thing I know about is from South India, from Bangalore, where I just came from. And I know that my housekeeper is a Hindu, and her mom is a Christian and her daughter is a Christian. So her mom was married to a Christian, but my housekeeper was married to a Hindu, and her daughter is again married to a Christian. So because the names, of course, was Gauri and Sarah and all that, but as far as cultural things went on, they kept up the whole cultural things. And so when asked why was that, she said, I get presents during Christmas and I get food during Christmas, and I also get food now from the Ganesha temple. And she works in the temple. She sweeps the temple floor, and she's a very good worker. So for them, nothing is making a difference of anything except the name change. They talk the same language, they wear the same clothes, they do the work very well, whether you're a Hindu or a Christian. So it didn't matter. Well, as you know, South India is very traditional on the whole, and but there's a lot of property owned by the Christian hospitals, schools, hundreds of convents. Of course, I myself went to a convent school there in India. So hundreds of children go to schools. But of course, none of them are converted there. But what happens is they take the poor children and they take donations from the rich and give it to the poor children, and they are converted. So there's a separate segment where they can stay in the school if you're a Christian. So there are a lot of advantages they have. So it is purely, I think, economics that is driving them. And they have a very clever method of doing it. So I think to address this issue, there should be very serious thoughts of how to do this in a very clever manner, how non-profit organizations can do it, how temples and institutions can do it, and keep up the spirit of Hinduism instead of saying, Christianity is the better religion, or Islam is a better religion, this is a better religion, right? So we have Ramakrishna Ashram there as well. It says all religions are same, but right? But they do understand the depth of Hindu religion. So it's a very tricky issue. And
thank you, Professor.
This is just a drop in the bucket because there are millions and millions and millions of Hindus.
Thank you very much for making your comments. I'm going to make some general comments. It is an international Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. And my request to fellows is that whatever your particular background, I think we have to go beyond that and do literature review and have a much more universal presentation rather than just based on Indic issues or India-based issues. I mean, the name of this fellowship is ICHRRF, Fellowship in Human Rights. So we cannot take a narrow view. Let it be remembered for future presentations that we cannot have just Indian subcontinent related situation. It has to be an international review of literature when you make your presentation rather than presenting from a very narrow focused or regional focused issue. I'm very happy that, following Anushree, Professor Pathak gave a much more, worldview of the problem. So we cannot actually ignore certain parts of the word. That is something very, very important. If we look at the aggressive traditions or aggressive religions or proselytizing religions, I think they have history of doing that, and it's not just Christianity and Islam. Even Judaism has done that. It's commonly misbelieved that you cannot enter Judaism. That's not true. You can be converted to Judaism. And there were, issues about, in the early history, whether Judaism was spread by deception or not. Where the Jews actually exercise deception. And there the fight is between Christianity and Judaism. because supposedly, you know, the Jews said that Jesus is the King of Jews, and that was kind of a deceptive statement to get him killed. So there are issues there. The issue of cultural appropriation, which Anushree was trying to address, is an important one, and it has been there from the beginning of the aggressive Abrahamic proselytizing religions. And they have used this cultural appropriation in one form or the other, which Professor Pathak was talking about, or Anushree, you talked about, or Professor Rao mentioned to it very briefly. Now, cultural appropriation is something that, you know, it's like taking away your intellectual property rights. You know, in US society, on one hand, we say that intellectual property rights are very, very important. But then you steal those intellectual property rights and repackage them as your own. And that has been there since the beginning of some of these proselytizing religions. So, you know, Christmas, 25th of December, was a pagan winter solstice festival. There's no historical evidence that Jesus was born on December 25th. If you see the Orthodox branch of Christianity, the Slavic branch of Christianity, they do not celebrate Christmas on December 25th. It's done on January the 7th. So what happened that even in the ancient time, the early Christianity misappropriated a pagan festival and digested it and repackaged it as a Christian festival celebrating the birth of Jesus. And there's no historical evidence that Jesus Christ was born on December 25th. So practices like this has happened all over the world. And there's a theological debate about use of deceit in Christianity. And if you read some of those descriptions, they are very upfront that deceit is okay. Use of deception and deceit is okay. In Islamic tradition, it's called al-taqiyya. Use of not only deceit or deception, but use of force and violence to convert people. In medieval times and in early Christianity, there was a tradition or practice called impalement. And I think Christina can talk about what impalement meant. But, you know, my God was a very jealous God who could not tolerate any other God. So the sin of not adopting Christianity was impalement. And the same thing has happened in Islamic societies, that the religion was spread by force. You know, if your choice is either you convert or you choose to die, or you live as a second-class citizen and pay a head tax or survival tax in the form of jizya. You live as a second-class citizen, which is popularly said as dhimmis or zimmis in Islamic countries. So despite professing peace or love, you look at the actual historical practices which are continuing to this day. Deception, deceit, and force are still in vogue, not just in India, pretty much all over the world. Now, issue of conversion also brings intra-Abrahamic challenges of conversion. So you know, in Islamic countries, Christians are being oppressed and converted to Islam. At that time, the Christian community worldwide decries this as violation of human rights. So if Coptic Christians in Egypt are being persecuted and being forced to convert, or if Christians in Pakistan are persecuted under blasphemy laws, then international Christian organizations make noise. So there's a lot of hypocrisy here, but you do the same thing by cultural appropriation. So in a country like Malaysia, which is Muslim country, Christians are using the word Allah or Khuda for Jesus Christ or for God. And I think it became a very big legal issue where the Christians could use in Bible instead of God word Allah or Khuda. And it went up to Supreme Court of Malaysia, and there were various levels of decisions. So basically, in the marketplace of spirituality, the aggressive religions, mainly the Abrahamic religions, because of historical colonial advantage, are continuing to use money, deceit, deception, force, or violence as tools of conversion. From an ethical perspective, that is not justified. We cannot rationalize it. But then you say that my belief says that I have to convert everything, so wink, wink, nod, nod, I'm going to do anything to convert the other party. A lot of time in traditional societies, Christianity is propagated by befooling illiterate masses by performance of miracles, claims of healing cancer by just praying to Jesus or attending a church. Now, all of us know that, yes, you cannot cure cancer by converting from one religion to the other. The famous Nobel laureate, Teresa, if you look at organization Missionaries of Charity, the money that was collected did not go for upliftment of poor, but went for converting the indigenous faith people into Christianity. The hospices, the hospitals Teresa created were devoid of medical facilities where poor people, dying people were brought, converted, and left to die, and no treatment were provided. There's a deceased journalist by name Christopher Hitchens who wrote a book on Teresa and decried the corrupt means of generating donations and using those donations not for medical care of the poor. In fact, the same Missionaries of Charity has been accused of selling babies under the garb of adoption of orphans, whereas what they do is kidnap the babies of poor ladies, poor women, and then sell them abroad under the garb of adoption. So there's a lot of criminality and hypocrisy going on internationally. And I think we have to look at big international trends going on and tell the international organizations about the hypocrisy they are indulging in. You know, your heart bleeds selectively only when the Coptic Christians in Islamic Egypt are persecuted, or Christian women in Pakistan are being accused of blasphemy, and by accusing of blasphemy, their properties are being taken away by Islamic faith people. I think we have to go beyond and talk to ex-Muslims and ex-Christians to see what tactics these people are using. And they are pretty much documented very well in the literature. So we have global problem. Just because colonialism was unethical and you ended colonialism in the physical sense, you are propagating colonialism by any other means. And those other means are sending money to poor societies where survival is the biggest challenge, to convert their religion, to deceive them, culturally appropriate their traditions, so, create Hindu temples or prayer books that are patterned on Hindu religious texts, basically to befool people, or in Malaysia to use the word Allah or Khuda for God by Christian missionaries. So I think we have to go beyond parochial perspectives and look at truly humanistic perspectives. Otherwise, this problem will create and will continue to create international conflict and unnecessary loss of life, because after a while the indigenous societies, the traditional societies will say enough is enough, we cannot tolerate this. When the breaking point comes, there is hyperreaction or overreaction, and that overreaction can be in the form of violence. So it is for the so-called civilized society in the West to do some self-introspection and make sure that unethical means, dishonest means are not used to propagate the religious propaganda. I think we have run short of time, so I'm going to end this seminar here. And next week we will have our next seminar. But for fellows, when you prepare, you need to do a wider literature review from a global perspective, because you are being trained as next generation leaders in human rights. So you need to have an international point of view, not rather than a narrow country-based or, one's origin-based point of view. Thank you very much indeed for everyone. We had better attendance today. We had at one point in time 10 people join us. So I thank everyone who came and joined. I know some people didn't speak, but they joined, and that's very good. And we shall meet next Friday. Namaste.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.